Hi! Some of you might remember me as the admin Mercy. I was admin on a bunch of anti-Black Veil Brides pages and anti-BOTDF pages. The entire purpose of those pages was to, not just express our dislike of bans, but also to express that people shouldn't take things so seriously online and people shouldn't be so easily offended by things. And I'm going to branch out today onto topics that I haven't covered before that have nothing to do with bans, because I want to get my point across, and the whole ban thing is kind of dead by now anyways. This isn't a troll video. This is totally legit. This is just me trying to express how I feel. Okay, the first thing that I wanted to discuss is the use of the word faggot. I don't mean it in a derogatory sense of the term. I just mean it as a word. The word faggot. Now, when I was growing up, I was part of a bunch of gay rights movement stuff, and there was people that would march these parades with signs that said "proud faggot" on them. And that really stood out to me, because the entire idea of taking back the power of words and not letting them offend you, because it's just a bunch of syllables strung together. It's just a bunch of letters. It's not really something that can have power over you. And I really liked that idea. That was really inspiring to me, and it was very good at dispelling a lot of hate in the world. I recently lost a friend of, I don't know how many years. I've had him since 2012. And I lost this friend because I posted the word faggot on his girlfriend's status. I didn't mean it in a negative way. I just meant it as a word. I was just saying the word, and then I explained to her that it's just the internet. You shouldn't take things so seriously. You shouldn't take things so, so harshly. You shouldn't put so much power into things, because when you give power to a word, that takes away your power. And when you take away your own power, then that gives you the ability to feel defeated. And you shouldn't have that defeatist attitude. You shouldn't have that sense of agony over a bunch of letters strung together. It's just ridiculous. And I tried to explain that to her, and she went on a huge rant against me, and she said, "Oh, well, you're supposed to be a liberal. Why are you saying things like that? Why do you show compassion towards the other side? Why do you act the way you do if you're supposed to be a liberal?" Well, because I was brought up on I wasn't brought up, but I grew up believing in old school liberal values. And it was all about unity and leading by example. If I'm gonna say that there shouldn't be hate in the world, then I'm not gonna hate you. I'm not gonna be hateful towards you. I'm not gonna say bad words towards you. I'm gonna be loving and kind towards you. And nowadays, that's not what liberalism means. Nowadays, liberalism is something that's pretty convoluted. It's become a bunch of safe space, trigger warning crybabies that just don't understand anything, basically. It's pretty ridiculous. Another thing that's really upset me was the fact that, a lot of the peaceful protests have grown violent. I don't understand that, because if you're anti-war and you're anti-violence, then you should be showing and leading by example. You shouldn't be expecting other people to not be violent, and then you yourself going out and pepper spraying people and hitting people for not believing what you believe. It's just not acceptable. In what sense of in what world did it suddenly become acceptable for people to go out and attack other people just for believing something that they didn't believe? It's called the anti-fascist movement, but isn't that pretty fascist yourselves, going out there and trying to silence people from speaking their minds in such a violent way? You know, there's no need for violence. There's no need for all this hatred. The left used to be for peace, and that's why I supported it. And now it's become corrupt. That's the only way that I can explain it. It has become corrupt. From people, you know, from all these new age feminists saying that people are mansplaining, to which I will touch on later, to all these people who are going out on the streets pepper spraying, to all these people who are crying and saying that they need a safe space, to all these people who are saying that they need to sit there and color in coloring books to feel better. You know, okay, I understand that coloring is stress relief, and I myself have an adult coloring book, but when you're sitting there and coloring in a little kid's coloring book and, you know, doing it because somebody said the word pussy on the bus today and you didn't like it, well, my answer to that is stop being a pussy. You know, plain and simple. Now, on the whole term of the mansplaining thing that I touched on, one of the things that I don't understand is this new age feminism. When I was in college, I took women's studies. I was a minor in women's studies. And they said that feminism was dead, that feminism was an old movement, and that, you know, the new movement should be about equality for all the sexes. And, well, both sexes. And nowadays, it's become a bunch of blatant man-hating, you know, bitches who just sit there and think that they can call men names and say that men are evil because they have a penis and, you know, they said something in a way that they didn't like. Well, that comes to my whole point about this mansplaining term. Now, this is a term that I've recently become aware of, and it apparently is when I think when a man explains something to you in like a talking down to you kind of way. Well, a woman can say something to you in a talking down kind of way the same way that a man can. It's all about whether or not that person that you're speaking to has a superiority complex. And a woman can have a superiority complex just as easily as a man can. So there really is no mansplaining. That's a bullshit term that a bunch of whiny bitches made up to try to explain that they were upset that a man said something to them. It's basically man-hating right there in a nutshell. You know, the whole idea of, oh, we need feminism because we need to make as much as a man does in a job. Well, if you do the same work as a man and you do as good of a job as a man, then you should make equal pay as a man. But if you do the same job as a man and you don't do as good of a job as that man, then you don't get the same pay as that man. That's the same with men, though. If a man does a job not so good as another man, then he doesn't get as much pay. If he does as good of a job as that other man, then he gets the same pay. And that's pretty much the way that it works. I mean, there are companies out there that are sexist. There are companies out there that don't hold up to the same standards, but for the most part, a lot of companies out there nowadays do, and they make it a priority to hire more women. Actually, there's like actually things that say that they need to hire a certain amount of minorities and a certain amount of women and all this stuff, because a certain amount of people of various races and colors and all this stuff to be all inclusive. There are mandates set in place saying that they're supposed to do this, so they do it. But there's all these people out there saying, oh, well, I'm going to get all up in arms because I don't make as much as a man. Well, it's probably because you're sitting at your desk painting your nails instead of doing your job. You know, that's a simple, plain fact of the matter. It's as simple as that. Now, there are people who would probably call me privileged for being able to say this. Well, I think that these people who are calling other people privileged are pretty privileged themselves, because they get to go out and do all these protests and do all this stuff, crying over all these things. First of all, the fact that you have the ability to cry about every little last thing means that you are privileged. The fact that you have the ability to express yourself and not be thrown in jail for saying that you don't like the president means that you are privileged, because there are other countries out there where you can't say things like that, or else you'll get thrown in jail or you'll get killed. So you're pretty privileged. There are people who can't go to protests because they need to work. While you're sitting there, sitting on your ass, probably living off student loans that you got from the government, which you are protesting, but you got those student loans from the government so that you could go to school and then therefore go out and protest. And you're just living off of probably daddy's money and the government handouts and maybe something from a minimum wage job that you have because you haven't applied yourself, or you haven't tried to get a better job, or maybe you're in school so that you can eventually get a better job, but you're spending all your time whining, so you're not getting that education. You're not getting the benefits of going to school. That's not the way that it should be at all. I guess what I'm trying to say is, stop sitting there and basically stop being pussies. And, there's people that are gonna complain to me about my use of the word pussy in it. But, there was a time when women would say, oh, I'm not going to take offense to that word because pussies are strong, pussies are powerful, pussies birth babies, stuff like that. But that time is gone. People don't take strength anymore. People don't stand up for themselves in a positive way anymore. They aren't open to new ideas or new things anymore. People are just closed-minded, and pretty much they feel entitled to everything they have, and they feel entitled to, censor other people, and they feel entitled to just magically get the money that they get. People think that they're entitled to certain freedoms and certain luxuries in life. You're not. You're not entitled to anything. You are basically born with, the right, what they say in the Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what you choose to do with that life is up to you. And if you choose to become a victim to everything, then I feel really sorry for you, because that's really all you're doing, is when you're getting upset about things that you see online that you see in the news, that you see in day-to-day life, you are basically making yourself be a victim and allowing yourself to be a victim. And, you know, it's really, really sad. You should never allow yourself to be a victim like that. You should never allow yourself to be controlled like that. You should never allow words on a screen or a video on YouTube or something that somebody said offhandedly to a friend on the bus that you happened to overhear. You should never let something like that affect your day or affect your life or affect you in such a way that you need to rant and cry and color and have a safe space. You should never censor other people's words or views. It's just wrong. And if this can be some sort of wake-up call to some liberals out there that are going along that path, then great. But I know it probably isn't. I know it probably is just going to get, well, hopefully equal amounts of hate and love for it. But, you know, I know that this is probably not going to reach a lot of people, but it's something that needs to be said. And it needs to be said from somebody that's sitting here that is basically like old school liberal. Because there's not a lot of people out there who are speaking out against this stuff that still label themselves as that. A lot of the people out there who, you know, were originally liberals are throwing off that title for something else. But I'm going to stand by it. I'm an old school liberal, and I'm not going to change what I label myself just because a bunch of new age pansies made it bad. I'm just going to add old school before the term when I say it. It's as simple as that. Because I'm not going to be controlled by other people's actions and words, and neither should you.